if God needs to arrange to have one of your kids sold into slavery for 12 years, only to then be thrown in prison for 12 years, only to then be promoted to a position where God can use him for his purposes, you're probably doing it wrong as a parent.
I'd say so. So let's get into that.
Hey everybody, I'm Nathan Warnock.
I'm Andrea Warnock, and you've joined us for Family Friday on the Marriage by Design podcast. And this is a time where we get to talk to you about God's design for family and how we live that out practically.
That's right. So usually my lovely wife, that's Andrea,
Hello.
Does the planning for these Family Fridays, and she does an amazing job.
Yeah.
You do a great job. But I was studying Genesis with my weekly Bible study group, and something struck me that I wanted to just share through our Family Friday podcast. So that's what we're doing today. And it involves one of my favorite Bible characters.
I didn't realize this was your favorite Bible, or one of your favorite Bible characters.
It probably, for the Old Testament, probably my favorite Bible character.
I thought David was.
No, I like David. Unfortunately, David and I have a lot in common. But Joseph is probably my favorite.
You learn something new every day.
That's right. So Genesis opens, of course, with God creating everything, right? Including marriage. We've talked about that a lot on our Marriage Monday side.
Did you say Genesis ends or opens?
Opens.
Okay.
And then Genesis ends with the story of Joseph. Genesis is a fascinating book.
Yeah, there's a lot jam-packed in there.
There sure is. But it opens with creation and ends with death, the death of Joseph. So, in a sense, the book of Genesis lays out the plight of humanity, right? We're created by God at the moment of conception. That's why abortion is an abomination. And then we live our lives, and Genesis certainly has the ups and downs of human beings living their lives. And then it ends for every human being ever, except two, with death.
That we know of.
Yep. That we know of. 3, including Jesus. Well, I guess Jesus is ended in death. He was just resurrected.
Right.
So, yeah. So 3. 2.
Well,
Right. What?
2.
But the story of Joseph is a fascinating story for me. But it's fascinating for me this most recent time that I read through it because of the sovereignty of God issues that are at work here. So we say that God, one of the characteristics of God is that he's sovereign. Sovereign means he's all-controlling, right? There isn't anything that happens anywhere on earth or otherwise that is not overseen, set into place, set up by God. Now, it can be a little bit of a mind bender to think about how free will ties in with the sovereignty of God. But clearly human beings have been given free will ever since the very beginning, because did we not have free will at the beginning, certainly God would not have forced Adam and Eve to sin, right, in the garden. So we have been given sovereignly, funny enough, by God, the ability to make our own choices.
Yep.
But that doesn't minimize whether or not God is in control of all of our circumstances. So what's fascinating about Joseph, and if you don't know the story of Joseph, I would encourage you to read it. You can start reading it starting in chapter 37 of Genesis, and it goes all the way through the end of the book of Genesis in chapter 50. So, in short, the story of Joseph is Joseph was the second youngest of 12 boys. And these were, so the 3 sort of forefathers of the Jewish faith and the Christian faith are who? Abraham.
Isaac, Jacob.
Right, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob.
Sorry. I'm like, starts with an A,
so I kind of
but it's leaving my brain.
We're sort of a mess right now. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Jacob had 12 sons through 2 wives, Leah and Rachel.
Yes.
For a long time, Rachel wasn't able to have children. Ultimately, the Lord eventually blesses her with 2 boys, Joseph and Benjamin. They were the youngest. And Joseph was Jacob's favorite, which is a good cautionary tale on not having favorites. But Joseph's older brothers got so sick of him, and there's some reasons why that you can read about in chapters 37 and 38, that they ended up selling him into slavery. And actually, that was the consolation that was negotiated by the oldest son over the alternative they wanted to do, which was killing him.
Yeah.
So they end up selling him into slavery to the Midianites, which were sort of a traveling group of people who ended up selling him to the Egyptians. So Joseph is going to spend the next 12-ish years of his life as a slave in Egypt. The Lord blesses him, ultimately rises him to the head of Potiphar's household. Potiphar was the name of the guy that he was enslaved to in Egypt. And ultimately, because of Joseph's integrity, he's going to actually get himself in hot water with Potiphar's wife, and by extension, Potiphar. Mm-hmm. And then he's going to be sort of downgraded from slave to prisoner in an Egyptian prison. He's going to spend the next 12-ish years of his life in prison in Egypt. Yet, throughout all of this time, you can see from the way Joseph reacts to those around him that are recorded in Genesis, how the Lord's meeting with him and growing him into the man of God that God desires him to be. And ultimately, God's going to raise him from prisoner to second in command under Pharaoh over all of Egypt. And we see that the reason that the Lord does that is because the Lord's going to send a famine throughout the land, and there's going to be 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And a dream that Pharaoh has, 2 dreams actually that Pharaoh has, Joseph interprets those, and then Joseph brings a solution to Pharaoh of, hey, during those years of plenty, let's save a lot of the food so that we have enough during the years of famine. Pharaoh ends up putting Joseph in charge of that sort of stockpile plan. Mm-hmm. The Lord's ultimately going to lead Joseph's family back to him unknowingly at first because they're starving in the land where they lived.
Right, yeah.
And Joseph's going to provide for them through what he's stored up.
Yeah.
Right. And actually, fascinatingly, the Lord's going to use Joseph to bring the Israelites, which, we talk about the Israelite people and we think of millions of people. At this point, it was the 12 boys and Jacob and their sort of people. Yeah. Right? I mean, whatever number of people there were. I know at one point it lists them out at the end of Genesis, and I think it's not very many people. Maybe 70 people. Might not even have been that many. They're listed out at the end of Genesis. But it's not very many people. And then over the course of the next 400 years, they get one of the choicest parts of the Egyptian land, and the Egyptians completely leave them alone for a lot of that time. And the Israelites experience this huge blessing and expansion. All because Joseph was raised up by the Lord to provide. Okay, here's our point for today. If we recognize that God is a sovereign God, that means the fact that there was famine in the land was not a surprise to God. In fact, it was allowed by God, right? And so bringing Joseph to Egypt is something that God did to raise Joseph up, right? My point in that is this. Jacob was not a good spiritual leader of his home, right? And I know that because it'd be easy to go, well, look, kids make stupid decisions. Now, granted, when we talk about kids, several of Jacob's Joseph's brothers were old, right? They were in their 30s, 40s. I mean, and the reason why I say that is because Judah, who was the, I believe, second oldest, or third oldest, the next chapter after they sell Joseph into slavery is about him mistreating his daughter-in-law to the extent where she tricks him into impregnating her just so that he will follow through with what he had told her he was going to do. So, yuck, first of all. Second of all, that's the level of integrity that Jacob's family had at this point.
And how old he was that he had a daughter-in-law.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's insanity going on in this family, and spiritually just a mess. And so my interpretation of reading what happened here with Joseph, with recognizing that God was in charge of all things, right? He's sovereign. So none of these things that happened, selling Joseph into slavery, didn't take God by surprise. But I believe that God removed Joseph from that family by allowing the boys to do something they wanted to do anyway, which was get rid of Joseph. I believe he sovereignly provided for Joseph to be removed from that family so that he could meet with Joseph himself and raise Joseph up into the man of integrity that he desired him to be. Mm-hmm. Because when you see Joseph living at home, he's kind of a snot.
Oh, he's prideful.
Right. He does some things that are not kind to his brothers. He's pretty high on himself.
He knows he's his dad's favorite, and he just kind of rubs it in their face.
Yeah, that's right.
Faces.
That's right. It's not until he's removed into Egypt where you begin to see him growing in integrity and relying on the Lord.
Yeah.
So you might be going, okay, we're 10 minutes or whatever into this podcast. Are you going to talk about anything family related other than a family that lived thousands of years ago? Yeah. Here's what I want us as parents to spend some prayerful time reflecting on. Are you and your spouse creating a home where God can meet with your kids and raise them into the men and women of God that He desires them to be within the walls of your home? Or are you creating the kind of home environment where God needs to get your kids the heck out of there so that He can meet with them directly to raise them into the men and women that He desires them to be?
Yeah.
And man, that convicted me when I started thinking about that. Because I think it's really difficult to read this story in late Genesis and come to any conclusion other than that God was trying to provide for the Israelites because He'd made a promise to Abraham.
Right.
He needed to get someone out of that family in order to provide for them.
Right. Because Abraham was given the promise that his descendants would outnumber the stars.
That's right.
And at this point, that wasn't happening. And there was the godliness of the Israelites had really, in large part, faded away.
That's right. That's right. And Joseph ultimately is going to have a kingdom-minded mentality about this. I mean, late in Genesis, lest any of you Bible scholars who are listening go, well, didn't Joseph recognize that God sovereignly called him out of the family and into Egypt just to provide for the famine? And the answer to that's yes. That's exactly what Joseph says. My question is, was the famine really the plan? Or was that the plan that God enacted after He realized, I need to get Joseph out of this family?
Yeah.
And, I mean, we don't know because the Bible isn't specific about this, but it could be that God plucked Joseph out of that home as a loving gift to Abraham, who'd been dead long before this. Because of the promises that He made to Abraham. And again, for us as parents, it's easy to get into the grind of life and we're just trying to keep our head above water. I mean, we have 5 kids. I get it. There's a lot of just doing the stuff.
Doing stuff, yes.
That's
Lots
right.
of that.
That's right. But we really need to, we have a child that was born a couple of weeks ago who's now 11 and almost 12. And that's what it feels like.
It does.
And, it's going to be another couple weeks and he's going to be 18 or 19 and he's going to be moving into adulthood.
Oh, let's not talk about that.
And man, if we don't, and if you don't talk about that time it's just gone. And then we miss out on opportunities to create a home environment where we're preparing our kids to stand up for righteousness before the Lord in the face of adversity, like Joseph did with Potiphar's wife while he was a slave. We're missing an opportunity to prepare our kids to seize opportunities that the Lord gives them, like Joseph did with Pharaoh, when God not only gave him the interpretation of the dream, but gave him a solution to the problem. Right? These are all things that, really, if we're honest, Jacob should have been teaching Joseph. And I don't know, like, it's easy to bag on Jacob, right? I mean, Jacob's one of the big three, right? God loved Jacob. So I'm not saying Jacob, was a horrible, evil person, not by any stretch of the imagination. But God also used flawed men. Mm-hmm. And praise the Lord for that, because there'd be no hope for any of us if he didn't. Yeah. But can we not learn from Jacob's failures? And clearly, raising his sons was a failure on Jacob's part. And let's learn that lesson, and let's spend some time while our kids are young. Or man, if you're listening to this and maybe you're pregnant or you don't have kids yet, man, think about that now. What does it mean to create a home environment that fosters our children's relationship with the Lord at a young age and teaches them these things that they need to know without the Lord having to meet one-on-one with them when they're adults? I mean, maybe you're someone that didn't meet the Lord in a personal way until you were an adult, and I'd be willing to bet you part of your testimony is, man, I wish I would have known this when I was way younger.
Of course.
And I was fortunate to grow up in a home where I knew who the Lord was at a young age, and I still look back on my growing up years and go, man, I wish I would have gotten serious about my relationship with the Lord at a younger age.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that looks like not just as a parent, I'm doing my Bible study and all that, but let's teach our kids how to study the Bible. Not just read the Bible to them or have them read the Bible, but how do we study the Bible? How do we dig into it and make the connections, and how does that apply to our lives? And, all of that, really learning Bible study as a child, right. and how to think about our faith and defend our faith.
That's right. Well, just a little thought that we had about the story of
really
Joseph and his family. So, man, take some time thinking about that, you and your spouse, and, brainstorm some ways that you can, create an environment where your kids are meeting with the Lord at a young age. Yeah. Starts with us, right? Of course. Starts with us.
It does. It always starts with the parents first, and then
That's right.
Trickles down.
Thanks
for joining us. If you've got questions, email us at marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com.
That's right.
Otherwise, we'll see you here on the next Monday. Thanks for joining us, and have a great weekend. Remember, God is for your family. Hey, thanks for joining us on Marriage by Design. If you were impacted by this video, like it by hitting the thumbs up below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and once you subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes release.
Excellent. Also, one of the huge pillars of our show is interactivity between us and you. So we would love you to comment down in the comments below if you have thoughts about this video, or if you have questions or other things you'd like to see considered in the future. In addition, if you'd like, you can email us. That's marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram @marriagebydesignpodcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching Marriage by Design Podcast. Finally, if you want to, you can tweet at us. We do have a Twitter account that is @MarriageXDesign. Thanks, and have a great day.